Greetings, this is Tanaka Rani Chindomu, and today we're going to be talking about the business of war. How can war be a business? War can be a business in the following ways. You see, war is when people clash over a certain territory. This is when people are trying to gain control over a certain region, a certain area of interest, and because they fail to agree or they fail to reach to certain terms, they end up fighting. And during this fighting, people lose their lives, unfortunately. But guess what? People also make a lot of money. You see, when fighting a war, certain resources are needed, certain materials are needed, and these materials have to be produced. This is where the business of war comes in. During the First World War, America started off as a neutral country, but then it later joined the war. But before it joined the war, America was supplying war materials to the countries that were already involved in the war. And during this supply of materials, something happened. Unemployment in America dropped from 7.9% down to 1.4% between 1915 and 1918. Why? Because there was a demand of labor. They needed people to work to produce the items that they were exporting to these regions of wars. So America supplied these countries with things such as ammunition, arms, aircrafts, and other materials that were used in war. Mind you, war is not about just fighting. People won't be shooting each other 24/7. People also need to eat during war. People also need to change clothes during war. And America was steadily supplying these items to these countries. And it was observed that America's economy boomed after its involvement in the wars in this capacity. That's when it was clear that war can be a business, because industries are developed to produce materials that capacitate countries to win wars. Mind you, the more bullets a country has over the other country, the more likely that other country is going to be defeated, because it has less capacity to win the war. On another note, besides the ammunition, war has been seen to inspire creativity, because mind you, war creates a tense situation. War creates a sense of urgency where people have to become creative to find ways on how to win the war, because lives will be on the line. So people have to be dedicated. People have to be serious. And when that happens, when people enter that zone of creativity, they turn to push the boundaries of technology. During the Second World War, certain technological advancements were made. For example, radar technologies. There was a breakthrough in radar technology. There was a breakthrough in engines that were used for the jets that were dispatched during the war. There were also discoveries in computers. This is when computers were made. Major breakthroughs in computers were made because people were trying to decipher codes that were being used during this World War. So this showed us that wars don't just generate profit through manufacturing, but it also generates profit through pushing technology. And guess what? These technological advancements, for example, even nuclear weapons or nuclear technology, are not just used for war. After war, because there will come a time when war ends, and these technological advancements may be used in another capacity. Instead of just being used to make weapons of mass destruction, these technologies can be used for other purposes. For example, computers may have been developed to decode encrypted messages that were being sent during times of war. But now we're using computers for a whole different purpose. Now we're using nuclear technology as a source of energy. Now we're using the technology that's in engine jets on commercial flights. So that's another advantage of war. War inspires, or war pushes for industrial developments, and these industrial structures and systems do not go away after war. Instead of abandoning these systems and structures, these structures are simply converted for another purpose. For example, if a factory was producing guns and bullets, that same factory, the same systems and the same structures can be used to produce another commodity that is in demand during that time. So it was discovered by a certain institution, which is the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and it reported that the global arms trade is worth $500 billion, 531 billion to be exact, and this was in 2020. And all of the countries that produce the most arms or most ammunition, which are the likes of the USA, Russia, France, and Germany, these are all countries that have one of the biggest economies in the world, and China too. So is it by coincidence that the biggest economies in the world also produce a lot of arms? So wars don't go on forever. Wars will eventually come to an end. And once wars come to an end, there's an opportunity for reconstruction because a lot of infrastructure will be destroyed during war times. And this is another opportunity that presents itself for the real estate world where people have to reconstruct. After the Second World War, there was an agreement which is called the Marshall Agreement, which was signed for the redevelopment or the reconstruction of Europe. And a lot of international companies made a lot of money from those deals. So one of the major companies that are involved in such contracts, for example, Lockheed Martin. But Lockheed Martin is not in the real estate world. Lockheed Martin is a defense contractor, and it racked up large sums of profit during the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. And it was reported that there were major breakthroughs in technology which involved fighter jets. This is when new fighter jets were developed during the heat of the war. So besides manufacturing ammunition, besides real estate, another area that benefits from war is the healthcare area. Because during wars, a lot of people get injured psychologically and physically. And this is where healthcare companies come in to treat the victims of war. And this kind of treatment is not a treatment that is a one-time thing, because the scars of war can go deep. So best believe that this treatment is going to be maybe a lifetime treatment where they might have to take certain drugs to cope with their PTSD, or they might have to undergo certain therapy to cope with their PTSD. So healthcare companies can come in from the after effects of war, and they can offer their services which they can profit from at a large scale. So these are some of the opportunities, these are some of the businesses of war. So it was also reported that an example is the prosthetics industry, where people lose arms, people lose fingers during wars, and prosthetics companies such as Osso and Ottobock have been pretty successful in these circumstances, where they have to supply certain prosthetics to help those victims of war. So in a nutshell, this is the business of war. War is terrible because it costs human lives, but it can also be used as a business. And we're seeing that the top countries that are involved in this business are successful. So this causes us to reflect on the dynamics of war and the occurrences of war, challenging us to look closely and actually ask ourselves certain questions of some of the things that is happening. Recently, there was a war in Ukraine. A lot of money was put in there, and these defense contractors benefited a lot from supplying Ukraine with the weapons that are necessary for them to defend themselves from the Russian attacks. So war is not just something that happens. It is something that happens naturally from time to time, but best believe that someone is profiting from all these occurrences. This is Tanaka Rodney Chindomu. Like, share, and subscribe if you like what you've just watched. And today we're talking about the business of war. The sources are in the link in the description. Thank you.